Now they can go. That's what I thought. Now they can go. That's what I thought.
All right. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's interactive virtual field trip. If this is your first experience on a Learn Around the World program, you can send in your live text questions in two ways. You can use the hashtag GEOshow on Twitter or the Q&A app built in the bottom of your window that you're watching in your Zoom window right now. Again, we do use Twitter, so just make sure you use the hashtag GEOshow if you want to send in questions that way. I do not follow my handle, so do not @ me. Only use the hashtag GEOshow. We also use Kahoot here on the GEOshow, so go to kahoot.it, log in with the game pin 334-2922. You can play as a classroom or as individual students if you have individual devices. And make sure you play along with today's quiz. And if you win, you'll get a postcard from me, GOB, from the Learn Around the World studio. Also, if you stump me on any questions, I don't know every single thing there is to know about volcanoes. So if I need to do further research, I will post those answers to Flipgrid. Also, feel free to share your research into volcanoes over on our board, our volcanoes board at flipgrid.com/GeoShow. All right, it's that time of the day. So explorers, are you guys ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. GeoShow is now live. Welcome everyone. Today's show is Volcanoes of Guatemala, brought to you by Learn Around the World. We're kicking off today's show with a survey question. So go ahead and grab your Kahoot devices if you're playing along. If you're not logged in yet, don't worry, you have time. We are not going to give out points until later on in the show. So we'll have a series of survey questions to practice, because the way we use Kahoot here on the GeoShow is you only get 10 seconds, so not a lot of time to answer. Also, don't look right down at your devices. Then you can't see the board. You need to look up here where you see me right now to see the questions and the answers. And the best way to learn is to do, right? So let's go ahead and practice. So grab your devices if you're playing along. Again, that game pin today is 334-2922. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and launch today's first survey question. We're going to Guatemala to talk about volcanoes. Where is Guatemala? Do you know? Where in the world? Is it in red South America, blue Asia, yellow Central America, or green Africa? All right, it's yellow Central America. If you don't know where Central America is, or Guatemala for that fact, then let's find out. Let's go to our map. You are watching the GeoShow. This is a geography-based program. That means location matters, explorers. All right, we're gonna go ahead and spin our big blue ball around that we're all living on, and we're going to zoom into Central America. Today, we're visiting Guatemala. So Guatemala is this country. I'll highlight it for you. It is in red, so I'll kind of shade in the country. So it's this country right here, Guatemala. It's a small country, and if you want to know the countries that border Guatemala, we have Mexico to the north and northwest, Belize to the east, Honduras to the east-southeast, and El Salvador, the most southern eastern neighbor that Guatemala has. Now, why is Guatemala such a great place to talk about volcanoes? Well, there's a mountain range that runs through southern Guatemala, and there's many volcanoes located in this mountain range. Now, volcanoes are not unique to Guatemala, but Guatemala is located on something called the Ring of Fire. So we'll talk about this in a second. And that's why there's so many in Guatemala. Today, we'll be focusing on 3 locations, and those are Lake Atitlan, which is an ancient volcano. It's a crater lake. We have Antigua, which is a city surrounded by volcanoes, and Volcan Pacaya. Volcan Pacaya is an active volcano that we're going to hike up virtually, of course, on today's Learn Around the World virtual field trip. All right, so I already just mentioned this to everyone, but let's learn our first vocabulary word for the day. Can everyone say ring of fire?
Ring of fire.
Okay, so the ring of fire is the area that's located around the Pacific Ocean. So if you haven't learned this in science class, for especially our younger classrooms, you will learn this as you go along. But the Earth is the crust of the Earth. And yes, there's crust at the bottom of the ocean too, but it's not shaped like boxes, but I like to think of puzzle pieces. So the Earth's crust is split up into what we call plates. And imagine each one of these plates moving around. So sometimes they bump into each other. Sometimes they slip by one another. Sometimes one goes on top of the other one. And because of this, there's a plate called the Pacific Oceanic crust or plate. And right around that is a really active area for volcanoes. In fact, right around the Pacific Ocean, we call it the Ring of Fire because 90% of all earthquakes on Earth locate or happen somewhere along the Ring of Fire. And about 75% or 3/4 of all volcanoes happen somewhere along the Ring of Fire. And guess what country is located on the Ring of Fire? That's right, Guatemala. And why are all these volcanoes and earthquakes happening on the Ring of Fire? Well, it happens through a process called subduction. All right, can everyone say subduction? Okay, so remember those plates are all moving around either below the ocean or on our continents, the land, and sometimes they run into each other. And when an ocean crust runs into a continental crust, the ocean crust is heavier. And what happens is if everyone takes their 2 hands right here and if you bash them into one another, one goes down and one goes up. So the continent, in this case, Guatemala, slips on top of the Pacific crust, and the Pacific crust goes deep down into the earth, and that hard rock melts into molten magma, and that molten magma gets pushed up and it causes a volcano, and lava comes out of that volcano. So we're going to start learn all about these today, but just remember, we'll get into it in more detail as we go along, but subduction is the main driving force behind the volcanoes along the Ring of Fire. And if some of you are curious about the current happenings in Hawaii, this is a different process. The Hawaiian volcanoes are caused by hotspots, but this subduction, this magma that when this hard rock melts into magma, it becomes really, really hot and it seeps up into volcanoes, and eventually they will come out of the volcano. And when we look at Guatemala, there's many volcanoes in southern Guatemala. There's about 37 of those. And we are going to hike up Pacaya today, which is an active volcano. All right, so before we get into it, I want to give a couple shout outs here live on the Geo Show. So let's go Harvest Elementary School, watching from California. Big shout out to you guys. And let's do Wilbur Elementary School from Delaware. Big shout out to you guys as well. We have several on-camera guest classrooms we have with us today. First up, I would like to introduce Mr. Travis's kindergartners from Mattawan, Michigan. Welcome to the show, guys. All right. And do you guys have any fun facts you would like to share about volcanoes today?
Go ahead, buddy.
The Ring of Fire has lots of volcanoes around it.
Yeah, lots of volcanoes. In fact, 75%, 3/4 of all volcanoes in the world happen along the Ring of Fire. And no, Hawaii's volcanoes, Kilauea, is not included in that. That's happening right now. All right, next up we have Mrs. Hood's 3rd graders from Bethlehem, Connecticut. Welcome to the show, guys. All right, and do you have any fun facts you would like to share about volcanoes today?
If the Yellowstone volcano erupts, then it'll cover most of. If the Yellowstone volcano erupts, then it will cover most of America.
Right, right. So for those of you that don't or do not know, Yellowstone is like a mega volcano. If that thing erupts, there's going to be lots of changes on Earth, and especially in around the country of the United States, especially, but much of the Earth's climate. So that's a mega volcano. That's going to be an exception to the ones that we're going to talk about today, because that one's just so massive. And last but certainly not least, we have Mrs. Robinson's fourth graders from Independence, Missouri. Welcome to the show, guys. All right. And do we have any fun facts from your classroom you would like to share today?
That when volcanoes explode, the rocks that fly out are called lava rocks.
Right, so lava rocks. Thank you for that. And for those of you that aren't quite sure yet, so I've said a couple words today. One is magma and the other one's lava. So perfect explanation. The easy way to remember this is when molten rock, so that's melted rock, when it is inside the earth, we call it magma. And when it comes out of a volcano, so when a volcano erupts and that magma comes out of the earth and out and is exposed to air, then we call it lava. So yes, so great fun facts from everyone. Thank you for all of your research. If you've done research and you're not an on-camera guest with us and you would like to share it publicly with everyone, go to flipgrid.com/GEOshow and you can do it on our volcanoes board. We're going to go ahead and start today's virtual field trip with a hike up an active volcano. So we're going up Volcan Pacaya today. And before we do so, we have our next survey question. So grab your Kahoots if you're playing along. And our next survey question for everyone is in 3, 2, 1. Does a volcano need to be erupting to be called an active volcano? Does it currently need to have lava coming out of it to be called an active volcano? What do you think? Yes, no, or I don't know? All right, so a lot of people are saying no, and you are correct. So virtual high fives to you. A volcano does not need to be currently erupting to be called an active volcano. So what makes an active volcano? Well, if we learn one more quick vocabulary word before we start hiking up, we can classify all volcanoes into 3 categories. So one is an active volcano, the second is a dormant volcano, and the third is an extinct volcano. Now, extinct is the easiest one to learn here because it's just like if an animal goes extinct, we don't have that animal on Earth anymore, right? Well, same thing with a volcano. If a volcano goes extinct, it's going to be there, but there's no magma coming into the volcano. So it will never erupt again, okay? And if a volcano is dormant, that means it has not erupted within the last 10,000 years. So for those of us that numbers get big, but just think the last ice age, okay? So if a volcano has not erupted any time since the last ice age, it is considered a dormant volcano. However, if it has erupted anytime within the last 10,000 years, we consider that an active volcano. Now, I know what you're saying. Hey, GOB, how come if it's hasn't erupted in 9,000 years, how come that's an active volcano? All right, we need to think about Earth in Earth years, not human years. Earth in Earth years, not human years. The Earth is over 4 billion years old. So 10,000 years is not a lot of time. If you put the Earth in grandma years, I like to think of my 90-year-old grandma, 10,000 years is only a couple minutes. So not a lot of time has passed. So that's why it's considered an active volcano. However, Volcan Pacaya, which we're about to hike up, has erupted very recently, much closer than 10,000 years. So let's go to Pacaya, abracadabra, guys. I hope everyone has their virtual passports with them today. We are headed to Guatemala, and we're going south. This is Guatemala City, the capital of Guatemala, and Antigua, which we'll visit next. So it's close to both of those major cities. All right, so Volcan Pacaya. Volcan Pacaya, today we're going to start at the visitor center. We're going to hike up through the forest up to the volcano, and we're going to hike in something called the lava field. So as we learned from one of our students, that lava that comes out of the volcano, that rock is called lava rock. So we're going to take a look at the lava fields and all the lava rocks inside and on that lava field. And from the lava fields, we'll be able to see Pacaya, Volcan Pacaya. And Volcan Pacaya is a little over 2,000 meters tall, or 2,500 meters tall, I should say. So that's about 8,373 feet is Pacaya. Pacaya first erupted about 23,000 years ago, and it last erupted in 2014, the last sizable eruption. All right, so now we're at the visitor center, and we're going to hike up Volcan Pacaya. Now, when you come here to Guatemala, you'll meet your tour guide, so you can walk up or hike up to the volcano with the tour guide. They point out where you're going to hike to. They'll point out safe areas and unsafe areas that we're going to go to. And once everyone is briefed about our hike, then we're going to start hiking up. So it starts off nice and paved, but very quickly becomes just a dirt path, like going up any mountainside. But if we look at the ground here, I want to just point out something really quickly. If you look at the ground as we're hiking up, we have very dark black soil. And does anyone have an idea what makes that soil so black? Let's check in with Mrs. Robinson's classroom. What do you guys think?
What do you guys think?
So I heard a couple people say ash, and I really want to point this out. So today, a lot of people, we often think lava is the most dangerous thing. Lava is the most dangerous thing. Even currently, if you look at what's going on in Hawaii, the lava that's come up where it has in Hawaii has not traveled over a couple of meters. So it hasn't traveled very far. A meter, by the way, if you're from the US and you're not used to working with meters, is about 3 feet. So lava is typically not what's so dangerous. What's so dangerous for the masses, most people, is going to be the ash that comes out. But also, it's not. It also causes good things. So because of all that ash, the ground, the soil around volcanoes is really fertile. So that means it's good for growing vegetables and fruits and so forth. So that's why many people ask me sometimes, why do people choose to live on volcanoes? Well, remember, even though this is an active volcano, it can go hundreds of years before erupting again. So people take advantage of that very fertile soil. This is a community that lives close to Pacaya. It's kind of a hazy day, but the reason I point this out is because people use the volcano traditionally and currently. We'll see after our hike up how a modern power plant might use a volcano. But this community, even traditional ways of cooking. So what they do is they dig holes in the ground, and you can dig a hole in the ground and you can use the ground as a natural oven. No fire needed for this natural oven. Just dig a hole, put your meat or vegetables or whatever you're cooking in the ground, cover it up, and you use the heat from the earth, the heat from the volcano to cook your food. How cool is that? Now, surely they're not doing this day to day, but that would be like in a big event to cook in that style. All right, so we'll continue hiking up. If you notice on each side of the trail, lots of vegetation here in Guatemala. It is a hot tropical part of the world. And because of that, you get lots of delicious fruits and vegetables, right? So on our way up, you can, many of the locals that live near here, they come to sell fruit. So you can buy things like mangoes, papayas, bananas. What's really neat, even when we think about bananas, the types of bananas you typically get when you travel to tropical regions is not the same as what you would get at home. There's only really one type of banana that's shipped around the world. So bananas, you can get all kinds of varieties. Does anyone need to use the bathroom while we're here? No bathroom stops. All right, well, there's bathrooms on the way up to Pacaya. So if anyone needs to go, we can wait. All right, so we'll keep on. And when we get to our next rest stop, the good thing about going on a virtual field trip, you can skip all the boring parts of hiking, right? And so here's another lady selling bananas. Some people are taking advantage of that service right there. And what's really unique when we talked about the ash, this very spot, our guide was telling us, was covered in, there was a big eruption. If you remember, I told you the last sizable eruption was in 2014, but there was a really big, the last like big eruption at Pacaya was 2010. And that 2010 eruption right here, this exact area was covered in about a meter. That's about 3 feet of ash. Can you imagine 3 feet of ash? That is a lot of ash. And it becomes a big problem. Places like Guatemala City, for example, when an entire city gets covered with ash and then it rains, that's not good for cars or vehicles or any other kind of machinery. All right, our tour guide on the way up after this break started cutting sticks, individual sticks, and you can turn to your buddy that's sitting to the left or to the right of you and guess what we're going to use these sticks for, and we'll see if you're right here in a couple of minutes. But we're going to use these sticks for something in just a couple of minutes. All right, so we're getting near the end of our hike, all the way up to Pacaya. And here we go, guys. So we're getting to the edge of the lava fields. We'll turn to our left, and there it is. So that's Volcan Pacaya. So we're saying Volcan Pacaya because this is Guatemala. They speak Spanish here in Guatemala, and that's how you say volcanoes. All right, and what we're looking at here as we pan across is the lava fields. And the lava fields here, before we hike down in there, I want to point out something here. So this right here, this is a structure called the lava store. And the lava store once was located in a different location. It actually used to be located over here. And they had to move it. Does anyone have a guess why they had to move it? Let's go to Miss Hood's class this time.
What do you think?
Because since it's all cooled down lava right there, and it's on the edge, they had to move it so it wouldn't catch on fire.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. So all this black stuff you see down here, all this is lava rock. So this is what's called a lava field. And if you notice, the old location where that lava store was located was right where that lava came to. So they actually had to move it. But wait a minute. Do you actually have time to move a structure when lava is coming down to it? What do you guys think?
No.
What? Actually, yeah, so maybe. So yes, you do. And in fact, they were able to move and save that lava store. And the reason is because we'll go back here and go down in the lava fields in just a second. But I want to touch on this, especially because most of you have probably seen on the news the lava that's erupting currently in Hawaii. And so there's a difference between the lava, the type of lava that's found in Hawaii, and the type of lava that's found in Guatemala and around the Ring of Fire. And I like to use these two items to tell the difference. So this right here is honey. And if you notice, honey kind of flows pretty well, right? So when I turn the jar, you can see it flows. And so if this was going down a hill, it would flow pretty fast, pretty quickly, right? So honey is the type of viscosity. It's a type of, it's about the same, has the same flow to it as the lava that's found in Hawaii. The lava in Guatemala, for example, flows more like peanut butter. Now look at that peanut butter flowing right there. Run, get out of the way. Think you got time to move, right? So the lava that flows that's typical of the volcanoes located around the Ring of Fire. So these would be lava that's located in volcanoes like in the US, say in Alaska and California, Mexico, and in Guatemala. This has a consistency that's more like peanut butter. And because of that, you have really violent eruption. So that means when it explodes, when a volcano builds up pressure and pressure and pressure, and it finally explodes, that lava is really sticky, and some of it will stick together in big chunks, sometimes the size of refrigerators, or even a car will fly through the air. So yes, it is really dangerous if you're near the volcano while it's erupting, but once it starts to flow, you really have plenty of time to move out of the way of the lava. So in Guatemala, what's typically more dangerous is all of the ash. And is anyone here, do you guys ever get out of school for snow? Anyone here today?
No, not today.
Anyone ever? Well, not today, but do you guys ever have snow days? Anyone here? Yeah, yeah. Well, in Guatemala, there's no snow days. They have volcano days for places like in Antigua, which we'll see. But that's because all of the ash, not necessarily the lava, but for the ash is what causes a volcano day to not go to school. So that's a good, cool, fun fact for everyone. All right, so when we go back, let's go back to Pacaya, and we're going to look at or go down into the lava fields now. But first, if we look back up at Pacaya, if you look closely, there is some clouds, but you can kind of see some of the fumes that are coming up out of there. So not only does lava come out of a volcano, but gases come out from inside the earth as well. And those gases can be really dangerous for people or humans to breathe. So it's not always safe to get really close to a volcano and lava. So scientists that study these things, they will have to wear gas masks to get really close. But we're safe down here in the lava fields. And we're going to trek down into the lava fields. You can see it's quite steep going down into the lava fields here at Pacaya. And there's no hand railings. So everyone, be careful. We don't want anyone to fall and get hurt as we look up at Pacaya. All right, so when we take a look across the lava fields, this is all lava that came and filled up this lava field from the 2010 eruption. So that makes this lava that we're looking at here about 8 years old now. And as we walk around the lava field, you can see how high some of this lava actually stacked up. So I'm about 6'1" tall. And as I walk beside this lava field, you can see how deep it is. So how deep that lava stacked up in some of these areas. So it went quite high. And do we have any lovers of pizza here today? Yeah, does anyone like pizza parties? Yeah, people like pizza parties, right? So when you go to a pizza party and there's a stack of pizzas, what do you guys think? Which has the hottest pizza in it? The pizza on the top or the pizza on the bottom? The pizza on the bottom. All right, so we're going to use that idea here. So the pizza on the bottom is hotter because it's insulated by all the other pizzas. That means it's trapping that heat deep inside there. Kind of the same thing is happening deep inside here. So deep inside here, it's still hot. In fact, it's 8 years later, and this lava is still giving off heat. In fact, remember those sticks that we were cutting earlier, our guide was cutting, and you guessed what they were cutting them for? Well, did anyone say roasting marshmallows? All right, so you can actually roast marshmallows in this lava. Even today, there are pockets where heat is coming out of that lava. And this lava first came out of the earth in 2010. So look at that. You can still heat up the marshmallows. You guys want a marshmallow? All right, sorry. A lot of things virtual field trips can do. I can't give you guys food, unfortunately. All right, so it was even warm enough where I was able to heat up my sandwich for lunch. So remember I was telling you the local communities, they can even cook food in the ground. So obviously we can do this up near the volcano, but if you dig a hole in the ground, heat is actually coming up all over the volcano from deep inside the earth. And that is from all of the magma that is still below the earth. It has not come out. So when we look at the lava rock, you can see it has a really dark black color to it. And we will walk across the lava field. So even though it's hot inside, it's safe to walk on top of it. So we're going to walk across the top. Lava rock is really sharp. I'll show you a picture up close in just a second. Because it hasn't been weathered. So weathering is a big vocabulary word for some of you. So weathering is the process when a rock is smoothed down by wind and rain. So if anyone has ever been to played in the river and you found a river rock that's really smooth, well, that's because that rock was once not smooth, but all the water rushing over it has smoothed that rock out. And so this new lava rock is really sharp and jagged. But if we look here, this is a lava store. So how cool is this? So a lot of the, or one of the local communities of indigenous people, they're Maya, come here and they make jewelry out of lava rock. And that's how they're able to make some income for their families here on top of the volcano, which is really cool. So if you ever come here on a real trip in person, make sure you bring some bring some extra money and buy some jewelry to take back to your loved ones of lava rock from Pacaya. All right, so we're going to hike back out, and I'll show you one last thing, and we're going to open up the floor for some questions. So make sure you get those questions texted in to the hashtag GEOshow or the Q&A app built into your Zoom window, especially if you're watching from the outside. But as we look out in the distance here, this is a power plant, and it makes a really unique type of electricity. We call this a geothermal power plant or geothermal electricity. Hey, we're watching the GEOshow. What does that prefix geo mean? Does anyone have a guess? Let's go over to Michigan. Does anyone think they have a guess?
What do you think, guys?
Okay, I'll give you a hint. This is heat coming from the earth. What do you think geo means? Earth. I heard someone say it. So it means earth. Can you guys say earth? Earth. All right. So geothermal. Thermal is like heat. So geothermal. So earth heat. Geothermal electricity. So they can make electricity from the heat of the earth. How cool is that? It's a completely clean type of energy. So we don't have to burn any fossil fuels and put pollution into the air to make that kind of electricity. How cool is that? So yay, geothermal electricity near volcanoes. All right, so as promised, here's really up close. Here's a shot of lava rock found here on Pacaya. And as you can see, really sharp edges. Over time, if this rock were to, hundreds or thousands of years of being weathered, would become smooth. But for right now, it's really sharp. Again, heat, you can still heat up things. And this is kind of gross, but just to show you how, or the experience of what it's like to actually be on the volcano. Remember, we said it's really ashy, really dusty from previous eruptions. And this is when I took my boots off. You can see how dirty my feet became from all of the ash on there. And this is what Pacaya looks like during an eruption. This was from 1976. Again, the big one that we saw all of the lava from was 2010, but the last sizable eruption, the last one was in 2014. So remember that one. The last one was in 2014. All right, so I know we're going to get this question, and I made sure to ask this when I was on the volcano to a local. So we're going to play this one first before we open up the floor for Q&A. Is it scary to live on an active volcano? What do you guys think?
Well, my name is Fernando. I'm from Guatemala City.
And where do you live now?
I live on top of an active volcano. It's called Pacaya, Guatemala City, Central America.
And are you afraid to live by the volcano?
No, at all. This is such a beautiful place that I invite everyone to experience this beautiful energy of the volcano.
What do you want to do when you die?
I want this day to spray my ashes on top of the volcano.
Yeah.
This is a very special place for me.
And how long have you lived in?
Live around the volcano for 5 years.
5 years?
5 years. Matios. Matios means thank you in Maya language.
All right. Matios. Can you guys say Matios? Matios. All right. Looky there. So you're learning some Maya today. All right. So we're going to open up the floor for some questions. And just to reiterate, one of the reasons why a lot of people aren't scared to live on active volcanoes is because really they happen infrequently. So it doesn't happen very often. In some cases, in other cases, it does happen pretty regular. And because it's such a good place to grow vegetables, and the people believe it's a very special and place to live as well. All right, so we're going to open up the floor for questions. So we got some coming in. Mr. Let's see, coming from Bella, how often do volcanoes erupt? It depends on the volcano. Sometimes Pacaya, for example, can go in times where there's a couple hundred years before eruptions. It hasn't. The last sizable eruption was 2014, so it's 4 years. When we look at Kilauea in Hawaii, a different type of volcano, but Kilauea in Hawaii, the one that you are seeing on the news, that is just one part of the volcano. That was an earthquake that happened, and some lava is seeping up out of where that earthquake was. But the volcano itself has been erupting since 1983. So Kilauea has been constantly erupting since 1983 until today. So if you see on the news say Kilauea is erupting, well, yes, it's been erupting since 1983. This is just a little offshoot that has started to come up. So great question there. Let's start over in Matawan. Do you guys have a question for us? Go for it.
How can a volcano be extinct?
Right. So a volcano can be extinct if it's a great, Hawaii is a great example. So Hawaii has a little bit, it's a different type of volcano. So today we're talking about on the edge of plates, and we talk about subduction. We call this a subduction zone. Remember that Pacific plate goes down, Guatemala goes up, or Alaska or California goes up, right? Well, in Hawaii, it's different. It's something called a hot spot. So that's in the middle of the plate. And so when an island, say it builds an island, so it erupts and erupts, erupts, it comes on top of the ocean, it builds an island in Hawaii. Well, what happens as the plate moves by, that hot spot stays in the same place. So when the plate moves, the hot spot starts building a new island, build a new island, island. So what happens is, and this is what we see in Hawaii, some of the older islands are away from the hot spot. So there's no longer any lava being fed into these volcanoes. So those are extinct. So we believe they will never erupt again. And again, we're thinking within human years, who knows what happens millions of years from now. But in that case, that volcano is not sitting on top of a hotspot any longer. So that volcano is extinct. Great question. Lots of other questions coming in. Let's see. This is Tobola's classroom, also from Michigan, I believe. Are there any truly predictive events prior to an eruption? So yeah, so if you go to the USGS, I believe, they have a classification system of like warning, like it's a code yellow, code orange, and code red, I believe. And part of that goes into what happens is a volcano will swell. It will balloon up. It's just like if I blow up a balloon, right? Pop. So eventually, if you put enough pressure inside a balloon is going to pop. Same thing with a volcano. If we have a volcano, there's enough lava, enough heat, enough gas, enough pressure, pushing up out of that volcano. Well, the volcano is going to start to balloon up, balloon up, balloon up. Eventually, it's going to pop. It's going to erupt. Well, how do we know? Well, we can take GPS readings, so we can actually measure the ballooning of the volcano. For instance, someone brought up Yellowstone earlier. Yellowstone is actually doing this currently. It's actually ballooning up. So they can tell, you can take measurements of where a specific part is. So what they'll do is they'll lay like a concrete, say a 2x2 piece of concrete, and they'll anchor something into the ground. And by measuring the GPS coordinates of it or the elevation of it, you can tell if it's ballooning up or not. But still, it's not exact. You can't say next week it's going to erupt, because we're talking in Earth years. We can think it's going to erupt, but it may not happen for 100 years, or may happen next week. We don't know. Great question. Let's see, go over into Mrs. Miller classroom. What type of volcano was Mount St. Helens? Mount St. Helens, the volcanoes located around the Ring of Fire are typically a stratovolcano. I believe Mount St. Helens was a stratovolcano. What made Mount St. Helens so deadly and unique is, for whatever reason, that ballooning that happens up, it went out to the side. So, and typically, instead of a volcano erupting and coming out of the top, it actually erupted out the side, and the blast went out the side. So it covered an extremely vast area, and that's what made that one so dangerous. Mrs. Perrin's classroom wants to know, how did they move the lava store? It's a small structure. They were able to just pick it up and move it. As you saw, it wasn't that big. Mrs. Lambart's classroom wants to know, can vegetation grow outside of a volcano? So yeah, so vegetation, if you're going to you get close, you saw all the vegetation, not right on top of the lava rock. It would take a while for that to break down and have soil to grow into. All right, let's go over to Mrs. Hood's classroom. Do you guys have a question for us?
How hot does lava get?
how hot does lava get? Depends where it's coming from. Again, the lava that's typical of, say, Hawaii, remember the stuff like honey, part of the reason is it's so hot. So it's about 2,120 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas the lava typical of around the subduction zones of the Ring of Fire are typically around 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. So not quite as hot. And let's go to Mrs. Robinson's classroom. Do you guys have a question for us?
My name is Leon. I had a question. Were you scared to go on the volcano, the rocks I meant?
Right. So not on Pacaya. The one I'll show you next, I would be more scared to be on. But Pacaya, you know, they erupt, but it's not as often. And even where we were in the lava fields, we were still kind of far away from the cone of the volcano. So even if it were to erupt when we were up there, I mean, it could be dangerous with the initial blast. Remember I said some of that chunks could be the size of a car or a washing machine going through the air. And obviously smaller ones can be blown further. But typically, if you're not in the immediate radius of the blast zone, most of it's going up. So it's not going to be, the exception would be St. Helens, like we talked about, when it went way out to the side. So I wasn't scared on that one, but it wasn't currently erupting either during that time. Great questions coming in. Lots over on Twitter. Mrs. Heights Classroom wants to know, what if a volcano moves back over the hot spot, coming from James? Well, typically the way that plates move, continental plates, it's not going to take a U-turn and start going back the other way. And we don't really have time to get into the processes, but basically the magma under earth, the magma it gets hot. It comes from deep in the earth, gets close to the mantle, that's the crust. And then it goes, and then it kind of splits where it comes up, it upwells. There's a kind of a flow or circulation of magma, and that kind of drives, it's like a conveyor belt. And so that conveyor belt is going one direction. But there are other factors involved. So we don't have time to get too much into it today. Great question on Twitter. Also, let's see, Mrs. Lambart's Classroom wants to know over on Twitter, can a volcano run out of lava? Yes, and typically it's just going to be the feed of lava to that. So if the pressure you know, we got all that pressure from inside the earth. If the pressure has been relieved, it can run out of lava. In the case of Hawaii, for example, Kilauea, it's right on top of that hot spot, lots of lava coming up. But yes, it can become extinct if it moves away from that source. All right, great questions from everyone. We do want to show you a different volcano as well in Guatemala. So we're going to go back to Guatemala, and we're going to visit Antigua next. Antigua is located near Guatemala City. Antigua used to be the capital of Guatemala, but it was moved from Guatemala because it has 3 volcanoes around it, and it had lots of earthquakes. And because of all those earthquakes, it actually moved from the capital from Antigua to Guatemala City. This is Volcan Agua. Volcan Agua is located just beside Antigua. Volcan Agua is 12,340 feet tall. It's a classic stratovolcano, that classic cone-shaped volcano. This is Vulcan Fuego. Vulcan Fuego is extremely active. It means volcano fire. It is 12,346 feet. Sometimes it's erupting weekly. And Volcan Agua is right beside there, and it hasn't erupted since 1972. It's over 13,000 feet in height. And I did not get to hike up Volcan Fuego, but I met a man that leads volcano expeditions up to Fuego, and he gave this video to share with you guys. This is from up near the summit of Fuego.
This is the spine of the beast, Volcan Fuego, one of the most active volcanoes on planet Earth. Right now we're walking on what we call the knife ridge. You've got about 1,000 feet drop on this side, 1,000-foot drop on this side. This is a gnarly place to be. And if you look up ahead, you can see the very active cone. Sometimes it just blows. No warning, you just duck and run for cover.
September 13, 2012. The 12,500-foot tall Fuego explodes, blasting lava rocks and ash thousands of feet high, and forcing the evacuation of 30,000 people from the villages surrounding the nearby city of Antigua.
If you can imagine this entire cone blowing apart, it shoots huge chunks of lava rock, sometimes the size of cars, straight up into the air, thousands of feet over your head. This is a belt from the guts of the earth. Volcan Fuego is one of the biggest. We're sitting at about 12,500 feet, going right up to the summit of Volcan Fuego. When there's a large eruption, ash belches out of this volcano. It can obscure and block any plane travel anywhere near this volcano. This gas, this is about as close as you would want to get, unless you had a gas mask. These are fumes coming from the guts of the earth. Chemicals, sulfuric gas, very, very dangerous stuff.
Guatemala's.
All right, and that is Volcan Fuego, located right by Antigua. All right, so we're going to go ahead and launch our last survey question over on Kahoot. So Volcan Fuego erupts so often and currently, it's hard to get up there and study it. So what do you guys think? What are scientists using to get close to Fuego's eruptions? Hang gliders, jetpacks, helicopters, or drones? All right, drones is the correct answer there. And if you want to see that process, I posted a video over on our Flipgrid board for volcanoes. I put a link in there for a great video showing Fuego actually erupting in drone footage. The cool thing about drones is you don't have to put people in danger. You can get those drones really close to an eruption. And so that's a great example of using technology today to study volcanoes and getting people out of harm's way because we weren't always able to do that. So great use of drones there. All right, so lots of questions coming in, and what we're going to do is we are going to jump into our geo quiz because we're right at 45. I'm going to stick around afterwards to continue answering all the questions that are coming in our lightning round. So so feel free to stick around for that if you have time. If you don't, have a great day. We're going to go ahead and launch our geo quiz. The only thing that we didn't get to on the geo quiz is Lake Atitlan. Lake Atitlan is a crater lake. All right, here we go, guys. What is the major cause of volcanoes on the Ring of Fire? What is the major cause of volcanoes along the Ring of Fire? Is it subduction, natural causes, Mother Earth is angry, or hotspots? Subduction. Space Fox takes the lead. Great job. How many volcanoes are surrounding Antigua, Guatemala? Is it 4, 3, 2, or 1? All right, it is 3. So it's Volcan Agua, water volcano, Volcan Fuego, fire volcano, and Volcan Acatenango. Space Fox still in the lead. When was the last sizable eruption on Volcan Pacaya? When was the last sizable eruption on Volcan Pacaya? 2014, 1964, 1978, or 2010? 2014. Great job, Epic Dog. What caused the formation of Lake Atitlan? Was it an earthquake, a glacier, volcano, or humans? All right, volcano, Magic Owl. And is Guatemala located on the Ring of Fire? Yes or no? All right, yes, it is. And today's winner is dun, 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 Epic Octopus coming from behind. Great job, Epic Octopus. If you are their teacher, please send me your school address. You can do that to learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. Learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. That URL is in the bottom of your screen. Can't get the postcard out without an address for snail mail, so make sure you send it there. That's the only place I accept them. All right, we're going to open up the floor for Q&A and our lightning round. Again, feel free to stick around as long as you want. Head outs whenever is completely up to you guys. Okay, you guys couldn't see that last video. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so maybe I'll show it again here in a second, but we're going to answer some questions. Let's see. Coming in, we said, when the lava from a volcano flows into the ocean, does it kill fish? I don't know. I don't know a lot about, say, for example, Hawaii. I have not been to Hawaii to look and research the volcanoes there. I imagine fish are going to swim away. They're not going to stay there and wait for it. I imagine if it fell right on top of a fish, yes, it could be. But yes. Let's go over to, I guess, Mr. Travis's classroom's heading out. Mrs. Robinson's classroom. Do you guys have another question?
Yeah, my name is Christian. What is the biggest volcano in Guatemala?
The biggest one in Guatemala is, I don't know what the biggest one currently is. I can tell you the biggest one that I went to would have been probably Acatenango, or if you want to consider ancient volcanoes, then Lake Atitlan. Was a huge crater lake that was caused by a volcano 84,000 years ago, was that last major eruption, and that was a very big volcano. Okay, so coming in, we have, let's see, Mrs. Miller's classroom. Why do lava rocks turn black over the years? Okay, they turn black really quickly. Lava cools really quickly. If you ever go to watch videos, watch the Hawaiian lava that's happening right now. Lava cools extremely quickly. So where it's not flowing, it will actually, not flowing too fast, it will actually form a crust on the outside with sometimes within hours or even shorter, and inside there it stays hot, but on the outside where it's exposed to the air, it turns black really, really quickly. So that over 2,000 degrees starts to cool at a very, very rapid rate. Let's see, how are volcanoes made? Volcanoes are made over time. So in the case of a stratovolcano, that's the ones that are typical in Guatemala, for example, and all around the Ring of Fire. A stratovolcano, so if we go back and look here, I'm going to show you a picture of a stratovolcano. So a stratovolcano, or a diagram, I should say. Stratovolcanoes are typical of what's found along the Ring of Fire. And how they work is once lava comes out and runs down, remember it's flowing like peanut butter down the side of a volcano. So it's not going to travel very far before it starts to harden. Of course, if any of it shoots out really far, that's going to go. But what flows out is going to cool on the side of the volcano. And because it cools on the side of the volcano, you can hear, this is the older part of the volcano. So you have layers of lava rock, and then you get a layer of, let's use a different color here. Let's use green. Then you get a layer of ash. Okay, and then you get another layer of lava rock, and then you get another layer of ash. And that layering of ash and lava rock over the years, as it builds up, boom, 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 it gets steeper and steeper and steeper, and we get that classic cone shape. We call these stratovolcanoes. So typically, if you guys have made the the vinegar and baking soda volcano in class before, and typically most of you have made a stratovolcano, that big cone shaped type volcano. Great question there. Let's see, Mr. Wheat's classroom wants to know, what are the clues some of the scientists are using? Typically they're using elevation changes at specific spots. They're looking for that ballooning of volcanoes to give an indication of how rapidly it's expanding, and that can give them an idea of how dangerous it's becoming. But again, it's not exact. It's not like weather has become, we know it's going to rain tomorrow. You can't predict it like that. In most cases, right? Mrs. Irwin's classroom wants to know, how much pressure does it take for a volcano to erupt? Again, that's going to be different for every volcano. It depends on what the cap is on it, right? So it's kind of like a pot. If you have a big heavy lid, it's easier on the stove steam to get out or push that heavy or a lighter lid up than it is a heavier lid. It's going to be different for every location. Some other questions we got coming in. What is the first volcano created on Earth? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. It's going to be sometime whenever the Earth started forming hard crust around the outside of the Earth. This would have been billions of years ago. So I don't think we'll ever know when the first volcano occurred. Let's go back over to Mrs. Robinson's classroom. Do you guys have another question?
Hi, my name is Daniel. How can you tell that a volcano is a volcano instead of a mountain?
Right, it's going to be if it has a feed of lava into it. So a good example or a good indication, if you're just looking, so if you're asking, let's see, let me bring up, especially if it's erupted before, in the case of a stratovolcano along a ring of fire. Let me just bring up my whiteboard here for you guys. So if you remember what Pacaya looks like, so typically if we see here and there's a crater or caudal at the top of a, this is a classic indication that is a volcano that has erupted, that top has been blown off of it at one point. That would be one indication that it's a volcano. It's kind of hard to tell if you don't know where it's the inside of the Earth, if it has lava that's feeding into it. And another, we can just tell by the area of the world it's located. So if it's located along the Ring of Fire, mountain ranges that are located along the Ring of Fire, then it's a higher probability that's going to be a volcano. Again, I travel to locations, so my job is we do all kinds of shows on the GEOshow. So I'm not a volcano scientist, volcanologist, so I can't tell you every specific visual indication of a volcano, but I assume it would be hard to tell if a volcano has not erupted, if it's dormant, and it may have lava coming into it, but it may not have any visual evidence of an eruption, at least any time within the past 10,000 years. So it may be pretty hard to tell just by looking at it. We can assume if it's in an area that has a lot of volcanoes, it may be a volcano, but that's the best I got for that question. All right, also over on Twitter, we got some more questions coming in, and we want to get to some of those as well. And let's see, we have from Mrs. Kempfert's classroom, how hot can lava get? It can get over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit at its peak. So about 22,120 degrees Fahrenheit in the cases in Hawaii, and at the lower end, 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit on the low end of that. And let's see, Mrs. Hyatt's classroom over in Elon, are there any organisms that can live inside of a volcano? Coming from Grace. Grace, that's a great question. I don't know, and I am not familiar with anything that could live in actual magma, any organisms. There would be organisms that could live definitely on a volcano, maybe I know in the case of, say, ocean, so I'm more familiar with in a marine environment because there are volcanoes under the ocean, right? And so what we call in cases of vents and heat vents where the water is extremely hot, there are specific organisms that are adapted to live in that heat and with those gases coming out that are close by, but they certainly don't live in the actual magma. I'm assuming that would be too hot, or it'd be way too hot for life to exist at that temperature. But again, that's something I don't know, and it'd be a good research topic to look into. Let's go back over to Mrs. Robinson's classroom. Do we have another question from Missouri?
Hello, my name is CJ, and I wondered, how long can a volcano eruption last?
Well, the longest one in the world is still going on right now, and it started in 1983. And so you do the math. So what's that? 93, 2003, 13, 30, 35 years it's been erupting. So that's Kilauea volcano in Hawaii. That's the one that you're seeing all on the news right now. So when they say Kilauea is erupting, it's kind of true. Yeah, it's been erupting for the past 35 years. but that's a different area on the volcano that it was a new spot where lava was coming out of. And that was caused by an earthquake. So remember, volcanoes and earthquakes usually they occur in some of the same areas. Okay, great question. All right, for everyone else out there, let's see, how many volcanoes do they have in Guatemala? So around 37 is what they had on our map at the Park Service, the National Park Service in Guatemala had at Volcan Pacaya. All right, so we're gonna go, we're about an hour over, so we're gonna go ahead and call it a day. Thank you everyone for coming on a virtual field trip with us today to Guatemala. Definitely research volcanoes, really cool. All right, bye guys. All right, until next time, I'm GOB. You've been watching the Geo Show. It's a big world out there, so keep exploring. Bye everyone out there.